Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 12 of Rambling About AI. And today we have no idea what we're going to ramble about. We have no topic. So we're going to literally ramble about AI. So, Philip, what's on your mind?
On my mind is the fact that we're using Stu Studio instead of Riverside here and having a very similar experience. I think a lot of the challenge that we've had in kind of explaining what's possible now is that it's really hard to know what's possible. We just kind of know that what we used to think was the next logical step that was hard, that's easy, but it's not real clear how far you go. You know, it's one thing to say, well, it's easy to create a CRUD app. Anybody can do that. It's another thing to say it's easy to replace a tool like Riverside, which is tremendously, huge amount of investment. And I would not have thought it possible until we started recording on it. I mean, how do you think about where it ends now? How do you find the boundary?
I mean, for a bit of context, people are wondering what Stu Studio is. It's so basically the backstory is that these podcasts take a long time to edit. And, we use Riverside.fm to record them. And this takes half an hour to record the podcast, but it takes me about 2 hours to do all the work afterwards, which is a real pain in the butt. And this is manual work. Riverside is supposed to do all this stuff for you with AI, and it does things like boost the audio and it cuts out things and does all this stuff. But a lot of it, I have to still edit. Like I have to do the camera. It doesn't intelligently know who's speaking. Like you'd think it would with Zoom. Zoom can handle that just fine. Riverside can't. Whatever reason. So I have to do a lot of editing, and it's a pain. And also after that, I then have to go to ChatGPT and have it generate an image, a cover image, and then I have to have it. I have to write like a description using ChatGPT, and there's a lot of things that go into that. It takes a lot of time. So I'm like, well, that surely we can maybe build a better version of Riverside that actually works the way I want it to build. So I kind of sided with Fable. Once I got Fable, I was like, can you create Riverside.fm? Can you clone it? Like, is it proprietary technology or is it something you can build? And Fable was like, yeah, I can build that. A lot of Riverside stuff uses open source libraries like FFmpeg and all that kind of stuff. So it was able to do that. So it started off building a very simple concept where it took videos and uploaded them, and then it started chopping them up based on this transcript. It used some intelligence in terms of looking at transcript and figuring out chapters, and maybe even if you're doing like a vlog style, it would take something at the end and do like what do they call it, a teaser or whatever it is at the beginning, and then automatically zoom in, automatically zoom out, all that kind of stuff. It was able to do all that stuff. So I started building Stu Studio, which is this little app I'm working on. And I wanted it to work for this podcast too. So automatically being able to normalize microphone volumes, be able to cut between us, intelligently, do all that kind of thing. And also be able to create captions and descriptions at the end. So literally at the end, I would literally go upload YouTube, put in and even maybe use the API too for YouTube. So I don't have to do really anything at all. If you want to use the word vibe coded, I vibe coded the whole thing. And it probably took me a day, maybe less than half a day to build. And what's crazy is what we were talking about just now before we started this morning was what is the value now of Riverside.fm? I mean, why pay $300 and something a year, which is what I'm paying right now, when we can do this ourselves? But can we do it ourselves? And that was the question we were talking about this morning.
Yeah. Is there scale that eventually comes in? I mean, I think a lot of a full operating product, like a company that sells a service to other people, there's more to it than the physical manifestation of the product. But you avoid all that by just building something for yourself, right? And so that then becomes a very personal experience. It's a lot cheaper to run. It's a lot less complicated. That there's some sense in which the complication comes from needing to serve a lot of people. And if you remove that, the problem becomes very simple. And those, to me, are the ones that are probably the most at risk, is when the complexity of running the SaaS product is not in the product, it is in running the SaaS. And there are a lot of companies that are like that. And I think Riverside, the way you tell is how easy it is to reproduce the same experience for yourself. And when you show that to someone, they say, yeah, but you can't scale that. You can't sell that. And so now you're either disappointed because you thought you were building a company, or you're elated because now you found a much lower cost, better way to deliver something for yourself. And the fact that you can't then turn around and sell it is inconsequential. Like, it just doesn't matter, right? You're still providing value for yourself. But it's that ability to identify those as entrepreneurs, as people who are evaluating angel opportunities, is like, When have you just built a tool for yourself, and when have you built the seeds of a company? And the signals we used to look for don't work anymore. Building an app like this would have been a signal. You know how to code real-time streaming software that has a cache, that can reconstruct a podcast after from a combination of the transcripts and the timing and the synchronized streams and all that complexity. That was really difficult. So in building that, you almost have to turn that into a company, because it would have been the only way to validate, justify the time you put into it. But the time you put into it was 4 hours. Telling Fable to do it. That's what you do with it now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned earlier, you talked about how CEOs or people at the top will be looking at these kind of things. They're like, someone that runs Riverside.fm is going to go, wait, one of my customers just rebuilt this tool themselves. Like, they're going to start frantically thinking, oh man, what are we going to do here? Because people can just do this now, and it isn't that hard. I mean, I don't know. I still think for me it's pretty easy. Maybe it is because I have my experience. And honestly, I kind of hope it is that way, because otherwise, I am out of a job. But like, I think it's still pretty easy to build. Maybe not something to this degree of complexity like I've built, but it's pretty easy to have something a simple tool. Maybe Riverside FM is a little bit of a stretch, but some kind of tool, like definitely the task management to do apps. I mean, Asana, for example, I bet their stock price has dropped. I'm sure like all stocks have dropped because you can do that stuff easily. Now anyone could do that. It is really easy to build your own task management tool that's tailored to you, and anyone can do that with Claude now. But yeah, for something like Riverside, maybe that's more complex. But either way, the people at the top of these organizations are looking and going, crap, the value of our software has just substantially dropped.
Substantially, and I don't think to zero, because there is a long tail of complexity in what Riverside or any of these SaaS have been a long time built. Like, they've had to been engineering something. What are they building? More and more features, right? So arguably, you don't need all of those features. Any given person doesn't use all the features, but they as a company have to have all these features in order to hit a broader customer base. So back to the complexity question. How much of the complexity is based on needing to support all these features? And therefore, if you could build something that only needed the exact features you support, does all the complexity suddenly evaporate? And if it does, that's a real risk. It's not the same kind of risk that we used to talk about. It's not the risk that you're now going to launch Riverside, because you are going to end up running into all those complexities if you try to replace Riverside. But if you were to do it and say, well, now I just don't need Riverside. It's not that I'm now starting a competing Riverside. It's just that I don't need to purchase it. Then that's still competition in a sense, but it's not as dramatic of a competition. It's not as fearful inducing in a company like that.
We talked about distribution too. Like, so for example, no one knows about this app that I built. No one. And after this, I'll probably publish it on LinkedIn, and some people will go, "Oh, that's cool. He built his own version, and it does automatic editing instead of having to do it manually." I would use that. But then it's like an argument of, well, do I then create a whole SaaS company for this product that I built and go in competition with Riverside? And then with that, you have Stripe, and you have an LLC, and you have billing and billing management and customer support and marketing and website and a blog and all these things. Do people still do blogs? Every blog I read now from an app is just AI generated slop.
Transcripts of podcasts now. That's the blog.
I just sounded really old when I said that. But yeah, I mean, you have to do the marketing website, you have to do all these things, and it's just so much work. And it's like, do I want to do that? And then to make what, $20 a month for a handful of my friends on LinkedIn?
But think how inverted that thought process, though, because what you're really talking about there is that you have the product, it's done, and now you're trying to figure out how to do those other things. And the ratio then of the amount of effort it took to build the product versus the amount of stuff that it takes to turn into a company, which is all that other stuff, that ratio is now very skewed. Whereas previously, if you'd managed to build the product, it would have taken you a tremendous long time. And somebody comes and goes, you should really build a marketing website for that. Then you think, well, yeah, obviously, because it took so long to build the product and so little time to build the marketing app. Why wouldn't I build the marketing app? But now that's backwards. Now it's like, oh no, it was super easy to build the product, but oh, I got to build a marketing app? That's so hard. And so that like inversion of how those relative timeframes start to drive your decision making differently. And I think that everybody sort of has to kick off that reflection. I see it in you. I would see it in me. Like, you see something cool and you go, damn, you make a SaaS out of that. But now you have to sit back and say, is the SaaS actually solving any of the actual problems of scale, or is it just introducing new ones by saying you have to serve so many people?
Another interesting thought on this is like, you're talking about like, oh my gosh, putting myself out of a job or whatever. But I found that like when I've been working with some other clients recently, I built them this app, open quote, close quote, like this fully functional app, the SaaS app, vibe code it in a week or whatever, great. There's so much work after that in terms of maintaining and evolving the app. That's continuous, like needs regular maintenance contracts. And so, because at this point now with AI, you're not just saying, hey, we'll maintain this app as we built it, and then in the future, you're going to have to do massive, long phase 2 build outs, and we'll look at that in 6 months. And now it's kind of like, hey, can you change that reporting page? I want it to be a whole different library for charts, or I don't know, maybe can we have an ask the AI button that actually goes through and like takes all our content and answers questions on it. Like before, you'd be like, well, of course you can have that, but that's going to take, a few months to build. And now you can be like, sure, I can throw that in next week's maintenance contract or whatever it is. And sure, you're going to be charging a lot more. You're not going to be doing like a $20 an hour type thing. You're going to be charging a lot more. But if you have this model where you're like on hand and you're essentially like a fractional product team inside someone else's company, you can do these retainers and you can build out features very quickly. And then the people that running the people that own the company can have whatever they want. It opens up the floodgates in terms of what they could build. Because you can say, they'll be like, oh, is it too much? They often say, is it too much to build this or whatever? And you'd be like, no, that's no. Like this, for example, then maybe they say, oh, can you build an editing suite into our app? Normally you'd be like, well, that's a whole different SaaS product. You need to integrate with API and you need to use Zapier to set up Zaps. And now he's like, sure, we can I ask Fable, and it'll be like, yeah, we can build a video recording tool that has socket connections and is live, integrated into your own platform natively.
Yeah.
And they're like, sweet. How long? 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Boom.
Couple hours, yeah. No, I think that's kind of where it gets the most difficult is, I find myself saying this a lot now. In saying it, it is done. But it might not be what you want. It might not be enough. It might not be right. It might not be accurate. We get that question a lot with dashboards now. It's like, it kind of sounds like what you're saying is I can just ask for a dashboard and get a dashboard. But it's not magic. How do you sort of explain the difference between those? And the way that I explain it is say, if you ask for a dashboard, you will get a dashboard. It might be wrong. It might have the wrong colors. It might do the math all wrong. The data might not be right. But you will get a thing that looks and feels and functions like a dashboard. And so if that's all you wanted, if that's right, then very much the job of a dashboard designer is now gone. But 99% of the time, it's not. It's just the first step that, yes, is a lot farther than previous first steps, but is still a first step. And when you think, oh, I'm not going to have a job anymore, at the end of this, if you're worried about that, if you want to check on that, then go and find the first prompt that you would use, knowing what you would use, and then see what it comes back with immediately. Because anybody that's going to replace you with the AI, that's what they're going to get. They're not going to know what you know to keep pushing the AI to go further, to get closer, to get better, to improve the experience, to use your knowledge. They're not going to know that. All they're going to do is take a stock version of a prompt, they're going to give it to it, they're going to see what they get. And because they haven't done that yet, and all they've seen is stories of people about how amazing it works, because obviously that's when people share the stories because it works amazing, they don't know. And they're acting more from ignorance than a real confidence that it's going to be there. But it's not the kind of ignorance that means that they're sort of misinterpreting what's going to happen. It's more that they don't know how to evaluate it on the other side, because they couldn't do it originally. They're using the AI to do it, and so they can't evaluate it. And it's that validation that you have a lot of.
What's interesting about the dashboard thing is that I know we've done this before. You've tried to create a dashboard and it's been a certain way, and you've been like, why can't it look as cool as your dashboards? And I will come up with my prompt and do in the same application, and it looks completely different. You're like, how did you do that? And the prompts are pretty much the same, but there's just so little, there's nuances in what I might say versus what you might say that completely create completely different dashboards. And that is why, we still are valuable in our different experiences and our different skills, is that the prompting can look very differently.
It can, but it sounds a lot like prompt engineering, which was sort of, there was like a time when that was a thing, and then it kind of felt like that went away, and now it feels like we're talking about it again. But the earlier version of prompt engineering felt very mechanistic. It was like you were trying to trick it into doing something in a certain way by asking it using a certain phrasing, and that it wasn't necessarily because you were adding in information. It was that you were trying to get it to work in a certain way, and that's the way the prompt was supposed to do. And as the models got better, you didn't have to do that as much. You didn't have to pretend to give it a persona to get it to talk in a certain way. Just tell it to talk that way. And so prompt engineering kind of kept fell out of favor. But now it's kind of come back, but in a different way. Now it's come back as like your value as a person who uses an AI tool in a company or an industry or a consulting organization, and everybody else is using the same tool, right? You're all using Claude, you're all using Opus. Your value then is your incremental prompt value, your IPV. I'm gonna coin that. It's my prompt is better than yours using the same task and the same model. I can write better prompts than you. Therefore, I can write more efficient token usage than you. Therefore, I deliver things more cheaply than you. Therefore, I am more valuable to the company. And that's value now. Not the ability to do it, but the ability to prompt better than the other people around you. And prompt comes from two ways. It comes from experience, for sure, with the tool to know how to ask it to do things. But it comes from, you know, the vocabulary. You're the expert. You know how to tell the LLM to make the button work in a certain way. You know the language to use to do that. Somebody else won't know the language. They'll just say, make the button bigger. And then it's going to be huge. But you know how to say, make it proportionally larger compared to these other things. And that's your value.
And we talked about this earlier. We talked about the new models that are coming out, the better reasoning models, like Fable has just come out. Well, not just come out, but they keep bringing out these new models which use up more tokens and therefore make these companies more money. That's another conversation, another podcast. But these new models that have more reasoning, we were talking about how, like, you can say something like, make the box bigger, or make that button bigger. I think that's a good example, but there are better examples, and I can't think of it right now. Oh, we talked about a request coming in, a support request, something like, I can't access the campus. Maybe it's like it's an AI that's embedded into an organization, and the students have it on their phones, and they go, I can't get into the campus. So that you take that prompt and you give it to the LLM, and the better the reasoning, the better it's be able to look at that. So if you go back a year or so and you look at or two and go back to the early ChatGPTs, you say, I can't get into the campus. It would be like, well, what campus? What are you talking about? Like, what do you mean you can't get in? Is this an app? Is this an actual campus? What is campus? And it doesn't know, and it has to ask you a lot of questions and gather information. But the new reasoning models, you can say, I can't get into the campus. It can look at a lot more information, make a much better reasoning, and say, okay, well, it's a student. We know that from its profile, and we know that they in this usually go to this specific campus, and they're probably at this door because we have location tracking on them, and all these different. It can look at these different things and reason and say, I think what it's trying to say is he can't get into building A on the campus, and is late for a specific exam or something supposed to take in 20 minutes. Has all this information. It can make a call on what it's trying to do, and that applies to that. Maybe isn't the best example, but it applies to a lot of things. Like what you were saying is like make the button bigger. With the better reasoning, it can actually really understand what you're trying to do and make a better call on those things because of the reasoning now. Yeah. And that's definitely made a big impact in terms of prompt engineering.
It's definitely in terms of how far the model has to go before it finds an answer. If it needed to go further, if it needed to sort of check itself, alter its course, then that thinking is really valuable because it gives it room, space to do it. But if your question was simple, the thinking works the opposite of that. It makes it worse. Or it's, if not literally worse quality, then certainly wasted tokens, right? And you notice that the leaning for these things is that they use more and more tokens. And it's difficult difficult to tell whether some of the advances that they're claiming in terms of the model's continuing improvement is from a higher quality model, or it's simply from extending the thinking window and finding different ways to obscure how big the thinking window is, because we know we don't see all the thinking now. So you don't really know how much thinking's happening behind the scenes, but you're paying for it. Yep. So you're a little bit stuck in trying to understand, how do I use this tool? So you see people coming up with routers that try to predict it. Well, how accurate is the router at predicting how good it needs to be? And so I don't think you have to think it's a conspiracy to see that incentives are going to push these companies in different directions. And if you price by token, all other things being equal, you're going to try to drive token costs up, which you can do by selling more of your product or by just making your product use more.
We related that to the Apple when they bring out these new iPhone models. The live mode was always a great way to get more money because I think it's enabled by default. People take a photo and then there's always got that awkward bit before when you're posing for the photo, that's it. That's always there. And it's like by default. And you think about how much more storage space those photos take up. And what does storage space means? It means more money for Apple because they push the cloud hosting. Most people can't be bothered to go and delete old videos and old photos. So they say, oh, sure, it's $10 a month or $5 a month. I'll pay that. You imagine that across thousands and millions of users. That's a lot of revenue because they've implemented these features that take more storage. And it's the same in the token model. These new models that keep coming out that have more and more reasoning and more thinking uses that more tokens. I mean, I spent $30 yesterday because I hit my overage and I needed to finish something, and it was going through my overage limit, and I kept seeing the invoices coming in from Anthropic, and I'm like, man, that's okay though because I justify it as being as work. But definitely, the reasoning thing is definitely valid.
It's strange, and when they've done the research on the reasoning, there's been a lot of different opinions about like how valuable it is. Like there's some cases where they'll just take the reasoning out and the answer doesn't change, or they'll replace the reasoning with dots, like just to give it like the tokens, and the answer doesn't change. And there's one way to look at that and say, well, thinking doesn't matter, reasoning doesn't matter, it's just pretending. But then there's another way to look at that and say it just depends on the question. Some questions are simple, and forcing it to think creates gibberish. Some questions are hard, and forcing it to think is the key to do it. It's just you don't know. You don't know until you do it. And that's kind of the crux we're all in right now is you can see someone else do something with a model, and then you can try to do it and not get that same result. And you have no idea why. It could be their history that they accumulated within ChatGPT. We know it tracks memory. We know it keeps track of things like that. It could be that. It could be that they use a more powerful model than you. Could be that their data was better than you. Could be that a stack they use was more compatible with their agent. You just don't know. You can't look at a product and have any idea what the effort was into it now, because they just create that break, that abstraction between doing it.
About the router, you brushed over the idea of routers, and that's quite a hot topic in one of my clients right now, talking about routers. And I think this is going to be a big topic in the next few months because, like you said, people are defaulting to using the latest model, and they're saying, hey, can you do this or can you do that? And then it's like reasoning, thinking, and they're going through tokens. And I think it's like, and also people are starting to not trust these models now. Like people are like, oh, Opus 4.8 is the go-to coding tool. But then other engineers are saying, no, Codex is the go-to, especially with the new versions they're bringing out. So there's definitely a lot more opinions now about AIs, and people are getting used to how they talk. Oh, that's Claude. Oh, that's ChatGPT. You can tell now. We know. So this idea of a router is like, I have a request. I want you to use the right LLM for this particular task, and reasoning too. Like, for example, like I was going to say, what's your opinion on routers in maybe this example I gave earlier about like, I can't get into the campus. Like, surely you'd need a really strong reasoning model for that initial part. And then what do you do after that? Like, how would you route these things? And how do you imagine routers being built over the next few months or years?
I mean, I see why you would reach for them. I mean, it makes sense to say not every task needs an expensive model. Therefore, we should have something that looks at it and then says, is this task that needs an expensive model? And just like everything else, it's not that you can't come up with reasons why that makes total sense. If I give you a 10,000 word prompt, it's probably complicated. And so you probably need a more sophisticated model. If I give you a very short prompt, you don't really know whether it's complicated or not until you really start to dig into it. You use that example, right, of like, I can't get in. Well, if that's the prompt, At that moment, it has no idea how hard that's going to be. It doesn't need to know how many places it needs to go. It doesn't know how much data it needs to gather. And the agent in the harness, now that will slowly figure it out. But that's not thinking in the way that the model thinks about it, because that's a long series of prompts that are happening over and over and over again. And the thinking is happening repeatedly inside one of those prompts. That's not the same thing as thinking in the completion.
We're talking about sub-agents, essentially. Like, go create a sub-agent to see if this is actually a human that is inside our database.
Sure. Well, so what a harness does, right? Like as the harness is helping it along, it'll give it that prompt, but then it's not expecting it to give the answer. It's expecting it to give the next step in what the harness needs to do. It's expecting it to say, go and look at blank, right? To get that information. And then the harness will go out and do it, and it'll come back and it'll say, here's what it is. But when you ask that first prompt, could it have known that? And again, you can come up with situations where it does, but I think in the vast majority of the time it doesn't. And you don't see a lot of research that goes in, because what you would need to do is you would need to take every possible prompt that you would give it, and you would need to send it through the model at different levels of thinking and at different levels of intensity or quality of the model, and then you would look to see where the inflection point was, where the cost and the value and the time and the tokens. You do all this analysis. You can't do that for every prompt. And the prompts are so different, it's arguable about whether you can do it in the abstract and then try to apply it to a prompt, or whether there's actually, you can train a classifier on it. These aren't known things. They're just like, someone comes up with an anecdotal reason about why that would be the case and then builds a company on it. And it's like, yeah, but how often is that actually going to be the case? And I think that the simple version of routing, what we're doing now, is a reflexive, this stuff's too expensive, how do you make it cheaper? Find me an excuse to use a cheaper model at some point. And so it's more of a desperation, defensive, I'm trying to save money. When you go to like, it's my strategy, I'm going to set out to do it, I don't think it'll work. I think you have to classify them somehow yourself and then give it to a model. And you'll see the agents will do this if you tell, Opus or say, act as an orchestrator, launch sub-agents, allow them to launch sub-agents, and use an appropriately sized model, right? It will do that, but there's just no way to know whether it's doing it right. And no way to know whether it's using Opus where it should use Taiku and vice versa. Because it's only in retrospect when doing it all of them, then you could ever tell that. And nobody can afford that.
This is definitely going to be a hot topic, because I mean, even small businesses like mine, we're spending money on all these tokens. I don't want to spend money, and over time these costs add up. So it's like, okay, because I pay the $200 a month plan. I thought that would cover everything. It's not. And I'm a small business, but I bet there's medium organizations that are burning through tons of tokens and spending thousands, if not millions, a month on all this stuff. It's like this idea of having a router or this optimizer is going to be the hot topic. And maybe they're people, maybe they're jobs, consultants that go in and say, oh, I see you're using the wrong model, you need to do this and this and this. Or maybe it is another LLM or another software that can actually do that for you. I mean, and that would be a cool thing to build. I mean, I should probably be doing that. And maybe I will. Maybe that's my next project. I already have an app called Many Agents that's on my website, ailogy.co, if you're interested. But Many Agents is an OS X app that will just run many agents, and it orchestrates, just like you say. It'll create lots of different tabs and that kind of thing. It's a bit like Claude Code. It's just a nice visual element to it. But what if the really cool thing to add to that would be to add many models or many platforms, so you could have many agents within many platforms, and then being able to orchestrate those. Like, so for example, you have maybe Codex or Claude running the orchestrator, whichever you tool. I mean, it could be any LLM, maybe a local LLM, and then you say, do this task, and let me know which. Make an assessment on which one you think is doing the best job, or is using the least amount of tokens, or so on, or which one do you think is most optimized for my tokens? I don't want to spend more than this many. Yeah. And then it will go ahead and do that and orchestrate that, and essentially still get you the end result that you wanted, but done it in the most optimized way.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see whether the whole idea of like token-based pricing doesn't end up being the thing that we have to set aside in order to make progress here, like to divorce these things. And sometimes you can do, we call them, I think in business school, economic transformation. And it's where you take something that has a marginal cost, you turn it into a subscription. and you take someone's subscription, you turn it into marginal cost. And in changing that dynamic, you enable different business models. And the one that feels like is going to happen here eventually is the idea that there'll be a pipeline that someone built, and that pipeline will be able to do a certain thing, a bit like we think about harnesses now. But when it goes to price that pipeline, it won't be on the tokens that the pipeline's using. It'll be on the number of those things that it processes through per minute, right? Like a rate. And then the second dimension will be what's the cheapest way to run that pipeline. And you'll be able to pick from a menu, right? Of, I want the fast, cheap pipeline. I want the fast, expensive pipeline. I want the high quality, the pipeline can run at different rates and different speeds, but then that's where the evolution happens. It happens in the pipeline. Well, I have a new pipeline that, all other things being equal, it'll run twice as fast. Well, we should use that, right? And so because you're not messing with the cost side of the equation when you do that, you're just messing with the speed version of the equation, then I think it keeps you out of that conflict with the incentives. Without necessarily have to say it. But,
SMEs are going to just start building their own compute in their own data centers. They're going to do that. They're going to be like, well, what's the cost of all these Anthropic tokens or codecs? And they're going to be like, versus us having our own, and all their data, all their engineers that are already working for them doing IT or whatever, they're going to be like, sure, we can spin up some local compute here in the data center and run our own LLM. And that's even more incentive then to the execs, because then they have a localized thing that they control with their own data management and policies and everything else like that. That's going to be the way it goes. And then everyone's running their own LLMs and they're just paying, for their own compute as opposed to using these third parties. I mean, that's the way I see it going. And even maybe small business, like very small businesses like myself, like running our own, maybe not Mac Mini, but that do it ourselves. Because a lot of the time we don't need fancy compute for things. We want it just to code. We want it just to write React applications and dashboards. And maybe sometimes we do need a bit more reasoning. I don't know, just a thought.
No, I mean, but you can see how being able to say that a dashboard can go from 0 to something, and then putting a cost and a time and an effort level on that, right? And then saying, if I was going to scale that, we're doing something internally where we're moving a bunch of Tableau dashboards from Tableau into HTML, and it's complicated, but it's the models know how to do it. They can pull a screenshot up on one side, they can pull an HTML on another side, and they can just iterate on it until they look the same. So it's not that there isn't a path there, but arguably that's a path that every single person who's using Tableau right now is going to want, like that sort of pipeline. So in my building it slowly over the course of 2 or 3 weeks of slowly iterating through Tableau workbooks, getting them to the HTML, adjusting the harness, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now it runs automatically. And it's going to get through the 200 some odd notebooks that we have in our workbooks that we have in a couple of weeks, and then it'll be over, right? But if someone had come to me and said, look, I have a pipeline that does that, and all you do is turn this dial and it goes as fast as you want to go, and you pay for a rate of 1 workbook a day, and however many you want a day, that's what you cost. And when you're done, you're done. And that to me would have been a very appealing product, because while I could build it for sure, it would also for sure cost more than just paying someone else to build it, as long as the premium wasn't there. And so, I mean, as long as they weren't charging so much for the premium that it didn't make it worthwhile. But that idea of like, can I just buy a rate of something instead of trying to fight with how many tokens it's going to take to do with it, is going to be a very compelling value.
Well, do you remember when, back in the day, mobile phones, like you paid by the minute? You get 100 texts a month, and you get 100 minutes or 1 hour of calls, and you'd always be worrying about if you're going to go over it, and then if you did, you'd get charged a ton of money for your extra texts, or you'd get blocked. I mean, that's kind of similar. And then one day someone decided, no, we're going to be unlimited in this, and we're going to charge X a month.
Yeah, you see it playing out literally within the AI companies. They're trying to do both. You got a subscription on one side, which the rate is fixed, but the cost is fixed, and then on the other side, where everything's variable, and so they don't know which one people are going to want to use. But that same, I think, economic transformation that they found in saying, when people are chatting, they don't want to think about how many tokens they're using. They just want to be able to chat. And so the ideal amount of tokens to give someone when they're chatting with something is exactly as much as they need, so they probably won't run out. It's like 95% of their typical consumption. You want to like remove the idea that the tokens matter and then price it accordingly. And that's the transition. That's how they got the subscription prices, arguably. And so it almost seems like that's inevitable, that everyone that's consuming the API, like they're consuming their own API behind the scenes, that everyone is consuming the API and everyone is paying transactional, then they are all going to do the same thing. They're all going to think about what's the experience that I can convert this transactional one into a subscription, and that's now the value proposition. And that has value. Like there is actually value there, legitimate value. So can you build a company just doing that? I don't know. Is that the new SaaS?
Yeah, I mean, back to like right at the beginning, we were talking about building this Stu Studio Riverside.fm clone. I don't think I would have been able to build this 6 months ago, because I would have asked that same question: can you build this? And I think I kind of asked similar questions back then about other apps. Can you build this? And it would be like, yes, it's possible, but you'd need this and this and this. And it would give you an outline, but it wouldn't be able to do it. Now it's like the models are so intelligent, they're like, yeah, sure, we can build that. If I was trying to build this, let's say a year ago, I would have to know about the open source libraries that I can use. I would have to know, oh, you just create a socket to have people. I'd have to know all these things. And obviously that brings a lot of value to my experience and to my, as opposed to one-shotting a prompt. I would have to know all these things. I have to put it all in a prompt. And then it would still be able to create the outcome. Whereas now you say, hey, can you clone Riverside.fm? It knows what libraries to use because it's trained better, right? So that's...
Yeah, but think about your experience there. Think about the experience of somebody who tried to clone Riverside in October of last year. It would have said it could do it, but it wouldn't have. It wouldn't have been able to figure it out, right? The models weren't there. But if you'd asked that in December, it might have been able to do it. It could definitely do it now. It might have been able to do it in December. But if you had tried it in October and it didn't work, what would you do in December? You probably wouldn't try it again, right? It'd probably take a little while before you went back to it. Well, guess what? The person that did it in December and it worked, now they're ahead of you. So it's almost like in being early, you were late because the models were getting better and you caught the model at an inflection point.
And you've got loads of tech debt.
You bought high and sold low, to put it in stock market parlance, without realizing it, because the price suddenly changed on you.
Right. It's very interesting times, and I'd love to know. I'd love to see stuff that people have been building. I mean, we say this a lot. Post in the comments if you do have anything like that. The stories of people doing what I'm doing, and what level do you have to be at to be able to do that?
Yeah.
And that's always fascinating to me. Like people that have, like our friend Anthony just built an app himself. And he was chatting about it. He built the whole thing in Lovable or whatever, and that's great. And people are getting these use cases delivered for themselves.
For sure. You do a Riverside clone. Friends of ours are doing apps. People send it to me. I always say the same thing. It's amazing. It's amazing to see this. There's no way this would have been possible. Seeing you do it and seeing I have you with it, I'm like, there's no judgment of the thing. They didn't write it. What are you judging, right? Like, they had the idea. Now the idea exists. Like, I love seeing that. I'd love people to share their projects with. Not because it is fun to see what people do with it, but the only way to stay on the edge of where it's going is to see what people on the edge of where it's going are doing, because you can't be on the edge of every single thing at the same time, right? And so you want to solicit that feedback. I want to see what people are doing. The first thing you say is, hey, what are you building? And not because you are interested in what they're building, not necessarily because you're interested in what you're building, as much as you want to see how far they've managed to get it. And if that's farther than where you've managed to get it, in which case now you should listen very much to how they built it, because that will be the thing that unlocks it for you.
And we're all learning off each other. Like, we really are. No one really knows.
It is a journey. I can be in a room with 3 levels of the organization who have gone through this journey sequentially, and every one of them is exactly 6 weeks apart. And they each answer the questions of the level below them, because everyone goes through the same steps as you're going through it. And it's beautiful to watch, because you can just see it happening. You can see people's eyes opening. Even my own brother was here last week, and the first thing he said to me was that they weren't allowed to really use coding tools at his work, and so he hadn't really experienced the end of it, like we have, and he was still working mostly out of the chat window, and he wasn't having a great experience with it. And I said, there's a button at the top that changes it from chat to code. Push that button, and your life will be completely different. And sure enough, we started playing with it, and he was writing scripts that he. So like it's you can't look at anybody that still talks about it by saying, look, it's not that good. You know, you still hear that. You can't judge that because it's just a journey. And the only thing you have to say is just use the best model. Like, just play with it. Just see it. Set the precondition. Set the premonition, the thoughts you have aside, and be willing to embrace it. And be willing to embrace it every single month, because it might have suddenly gotten better. Who knows?
All right, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks everyone for listening. Listening to us ramble, and yeah, we'll see you next episode. Thanks. Oh, and if this thing works, then hopefully you'll see a recording of it from my app. If not, then you'll never see this. Yeah, true. Thanks, bye.